Hi everybody, TJ Mack and Vintage Cards and Nostalgia here. Well, Father's Day is almost here, and for me, it's one of the most meaningful times of the year to make a video. If you're a regular on my channel, you already know how much my family shapes the way I collect. The eras that I love, the players I focus on. So much of it is tied to my father and my father-in-law, and the era they became of age as sports fans. Both of them have since passed, but the memories live on. I often think of them when I flip through my collection. I'm also a father myself to 4 amazing kids, 2 boys and 2 girls, ages 12 to 19. My wife and I are so proud of them. They're good kids, they do well in school, and they work hard. Now today I want to share a few cards with you, including 2 new pickups, and talk about how they connect to Father's Day and the legacy I hope to pass on to my children through this hobby. The first card I want to show is a 1973 Topps Joe Morgan, and it reminds me of my oldest son, Michael. He's 17 now and just finishing his junior year of high school. This past baseball season was one that we'll never forget. Last year, his varsity team was young, mostly sophomores and freshmen, and they didn't win a single game, finishing 0-15. This year didn't start much better. They were 1-9 after 10 games, but if you watched them play, you could see the pieces were starting to come together. Then something clicked. They won 4 of their last 5 games, heading into the sectional playoffs. Michael started on the mound in the first round game, facing the number 1 seed, and he threw a complete game, which is 7 innings at that level, allowing only 2 hits with 10 strikeouts. His team won 5-0. In the next round, they played a team who won the state championship 2 years ago for their size district. Incredibly, his team scored 5 runs in the first inning and never looked back, winning 6-4. Our starting pitcher, who is a sophomore, pitched a complete game. This set up the sectional championship game against one of the powerhouse teams in the area, who was 18-3 that season. Michael was again the starting pitcher, going up against a senior who was already committed to a Division II college. The game was played at one of the most beautiful fields in our area and was even live streamed with announcers. Both pitchers ended up throwing complete games. Michael's team lost 2-1. It was a heartbreaker, with the game-winning run being unearned. Even though the team came up short, we couldn't be prouder of how they played. Watching him out there, I couldn't help but think back to when he was about 10 years old, just learning to pitch. We'd head outside and I'd crouch down to catch for him. We'd make it fun. I'd pretend different hitters were at the plate, and I would imitate their batting stances. Joe Morgan was always one of his favorites, and I'd stand up between pitches, flapping my elbow like Morgan used to do in the batter's box, and he'd laugh every time. Those are the moments that I'll never forget. This 73 Joe Morgan card takes me right back to those evenings in the backyard. And now looking at how far Michael's come, I want him to have this card someday to remember those good times that we've had. I sometimes hear collectors talk about how their kids just don't seem to care about their card collections. And I get it. It can be a little disheartening. But I think we need to be honest. A lot of that has to do with where our kids are in life. Interests shift, perspectives grow, and sometimes they just haven't gotten there yet. And maybe they never will fully embrace it. But I do believe this. If we want our children to care about our vintage sports cards, we have to do more than just preserve them. We have to tell the stories behind them. Because kids don't just fall in love with things. They fall in love with meaning. Let them see the sparkle in your eye when you hold something like this 1959 Topps Rocky Colavito that I recently picked up. It's not just a card, it's a bridge across generations. Both my father and father-in-law were big Colavito fans. My father-in-law grew up cheering for the Indians, while my dad, though a lifelong Yankees fan, caught a Tigers game in Detroit as a kid and saw Rocky play. And that moment always stuck with him. So now, as part of my own collecting journey, I'm putting together a small group of cards I hope to pass on to each of my kids. It's not a mountain of cardboard, just 10 or so cards and magazines, each one chosen for a reason, each one carrying a story. For example, I'm giving each of my kids a Rocky Colavito card. One will get the 57, another the 59, both in their Indians uniforms, in remembrance of my father-in-law. And then there's a 61 and 62, were Colavito's with Detroit, which is where my dad followed him. This way, even if my kids aren't collectors, they'll have a few pieces that hold real meaning. A tangible reminder of the players that my grandfathers enjoyed watching, the stories they told, and the way that baseball brought them joy. Now, I'm not expecting my kids to take on my entire collection someday. If they do, that's great. But I'd rather they chase their own passions, and maybe the value of my collection can help them in the pursuit of that. But what matters most to me is that they understand what these cards meant, and to those who came before them, the special meaning the players that they followed had for them. So here's my advice. Don't just show the family the paper, show them the history. Don't just talk about the value, share the why. Because if your kids never see why it matters to you, they'll never have a reason for it to matter to them. Without your voice, your passion, your stories, it's just a box of old cardboard. With them, it's a treasure chest of memory, meaning, and love. Finally, there are 4 cards that have stayed with me ever since I was 7 years old. Back in 1982, Kmart released a 20th anniversary set. It was a special collection of 44 cards celebrating the MVPs from 1962 to 1981. It marked 2 decades since Kmart opened its first store in 1962. And if you were a kid collecting back then, there's a good chance that you had this set too. I remember sitting in my room, flipping through those cards over and over, soaking in the names, the faces, the history of the game, and I'm pretty sure it was my first introduction to many of these players, and to vintage cards in general. Of all the cards in that set though, 4 of them stood out, and they lodged themselves in my memory. It was the 1962 Mickey Mantle, the 1965 Willie Mays, 1971 Vida Blue, and this 1968 Denny McLain. Now Mantle and Mays, those are pretty obvious. Even as a kid, I knew they were legends. I might not have known their stats or their stories, but their names had already carried weight. The Vida Blue, though, grabbed me for a different reason. The image was so striking. His expression, his motion, and as a kid, I was convinced he was flashing the peace sign. Of course, now I know he was showing off his pitching grip, but back then, it made an impression on me. And then there was Denny McLain. At the time, I didn't know anything about him, but I loved that card. The glasses made him more look like a professor than a pitcher. There was just something about him that stuck with me. Now, a couple weeks ago, I finally added the original 1968 Denny McLain card to my collection, completing the group that has lived in my memory for more than 40 years. Like the Rocky Colavitos, I plan to pass these on to each one of my kids. Not because they're the most valuable cards, but because they're the ones that made me fall in love with vintage baseball. They're a little piece of that red, white, and blue Kmart box, and a big piece of why I collect it all. As Father's Day approaches, I'm reminded that what we leave behind isn't just about things, it's about stories and memories. These cards, these moments, they're more than collectibles. They're a bridge between generations, a way to keep the past alive and to inspire the future. So whether you're passing down a single card or an entire collection, take the time to share the stories that make them special. Let your family see the passion behind each piece. Because it's not the cards themselves that matter, it's the connection they represent. Happy Father's Day, and until we speak again, take care.